Hey guys, I wanted to put together a quick video to address a question that came up about what even foundation are we building on? Like, what's the root of this work and how do we branch out and practically start to apply this? Because I get that some of this work is very overwhelming. It's a very different way of working and we have to start to question a lot of what we take for granted, a lot of what we've been told is the way to work with people. And so I just want to highlight what the kind of bare bottoms root of this practice is. So at the very essence of this ecosomatic approach, this somatic ecology framework, what we're concerned with is a whole life practice, a longevity practice, something that's going to help people practice until they drop dead when they're 97 years old. So some of what we're going to go through can help improve performance, but at a certain point we have to keep in mind that health and performance veer off. So they are definitely correlated to a certain point, but then as you improve performance, health will diminish. There's a reason you only have so many Olympic games you can compete at. If you are taxing your body at a very high performance level, a very high athletic level, your health is going to suffer certain consequences. And that's not to say that that's wrong by any means. If that's what you want to do, then we can help you do that. But we have to keep in mind whether we are actually working with a person toward their goals or whether we're kind of letting their goals derail us or whether we're even trying to co-opt their goals. So our job is basically to help bring awareness to people about what they're working for and why. So once we've gotten that cleared up, there are two main causes of most dysfunction and most tension in a lot of people's lives. There are two main models that can help us highlight how we can go about working with people. So on the one hand, there is the evolutionary model, and the other is what I think of as kind of the somatic model. And luckily, they're both simply just three questions we can ask ourselves to help inform how we practice with that person we're working with. So let's go through the evolutionary model first. Essentially, there are three questions we can ask that can inform what are some of the best practices we can use to get the most benefit for this person we're working with. The first question is, what did the human animal evolve to do? Now, we do not have any clear-cut answers. We don't know what people were doing back in the paleo days, but based on general context, we can make a few pretty good guesses. So we know that there wasn't a Whole Foods we could go to. In fact, there wasn't food in general, at least as you and I know it now. What there was an abundance of would be plants and animals. So that leaves us with the decidedly unsexy task of going out, collecting plants and animals, whether that's farming, hunting, gathering, scavenging, whatever the case may be, and then processing that into something that might resemble food. So processing in the big picture sense of cutting, tearing, ripping, smashing, dicing, cooking, anything that can make that plant or animal digestible so that we can take it in as calories. So we have to take all of that into account. That would include a whole lot of movement in diverse, natural, complex environments, going through a wide variety of movements to do so. Often somewhat repetitive, right? Think of like walking or crouching low, reaching to something, pounding away until that tuber or that piece of meat is easily digestible. So we can take that into account. There's also quite a bit of leisure time, right? We didn't have jobs, we didn't have Netflix, we didn't have PlayStation, we didn't have any of the stuff that fills so much of our time these days. We didn't have the internet. So there's likely a whole lot of leisure time spent really just hanging out, de-stressing, a very conscious shift to tune off or turn off, tune out, tone down, whatever the words are. We took our level from up here to down here very often. And again, we can look to anthropological studies to maybe cue us in on that. Like the typical hunter-gatherer work week is maybe 16 or so hours. And that gets food, that gets shelter, that gets water. So outside of that, there's a whole lot of downtime, a whole lot of leisure time, probably a whole lot of storytelling, again, as our earliest form of entertainment. So We can keep that in mind as well. There was frequent complex movement. There was a whole lot of downtime, a whole lot of leisure time. And most of it was in tribes. We are inherently social animals. And when you are on the grasslands of the savanna or the wilderness in general, you tribe up pretty quick because that increases your chances of survival exponentially. And we can look at numerous avenues of what we'd consider modern science to highlight that as well. Psychology highlights the fact that we are social animals. Biology highlights the fact that we are social animals. If you look at the microbiome, we share microbiomes. Sociology obviously says that we are social animals. We pass on behaviors and stories the same way we would pass viruses. So a whole lot of different disciplines of modern science point to the fact that we are social animals. So again, big picture context, we moved frequently, day in and day out, in diverse ways, in natural, complex environments. We had a lot of leisure time, a lot of time to de-stress and reduce that neural tension. And we were doing it primarily in groups of people. So that's question one. Question two is, what do we currently do with it? And this is a lot easier to answer because we can look at what we do on any given day. We stress about work. Even the most dynamic of us move for about 4% of the days. If we're getting an hour of exercise every day, we move about 4% of the day. Often in repetitive sagittal plane kind of stuff, in boxy environments called gyms. We live basically a step removed from just about everything in our lives. We put a screen in front of us. And so we can just look and say that, okay, clearly there's a difference between what the human animal did in its natural environment and what we currently do. Now, that is not to romanticize the paleo days. Things like the internet, things like antibiotics, things like agriculture led to a lot of good stuff as well. You and I wouldn't be here without those things. So it's not to overly romanticize and say we have to get back to paleo living. We have to get back to the quote natural way of doing things. What that is saying is that there is a gap that leads to pretty predictable consequences. Now, again, there's a choice at play. We can choose to go full on caveman Tarzan, which will of course have its consequences as well. Or we can choose to take manageable small steps to at least bridge that gap. So again, we don't want to romanticize the paleo stuff, but we do want to say that if you take any animal out of its natural context, there are going to be consequences. Things like, in our case, obesity, immobility, depression, anxiety, all sorts of mental health things, just like loss of purpose and connection to the land. And it's really widespread, and it's all manageable to a certain degree. If we can take, and this is the third question, if we can take steps day in and day out that move us a little bit closer toward bridging that gap. So that's the third question. What can we do consistently every single day to bridge that gap? Some of the things that I found to be most effective in just about any human body I have worked with are the following. If you sit on the floor for an extra half an hour or an hour every day, your body will work better. There are a few reasons for that. One, we are adding stability, getting ourselves low to the ground so we can reduce a bit of neural tension that way. Two, we are introducing novel positions to our body. And I say novel in quotes because really these are the original human positions. Things like squatting, things like kneeling, things like side sitting or long sitting with my legs out in front of me. These are the positions that we've been doing since we were a species. These are the positions we've been doing since we were infants. These are just natural human things. It's a logical jump, but if you take a human body and have it do natural human things, it's gonna work better as a body. So again, experientially, I've found that when I'm introducing work to clients, an easy daily practice is spend an extra half hour or an hour more on the floor every day. You don't have to go sit in the grass or the mulch. You can do this on carpet too. There are a few reasons why it is so successful, and something we as coaches can take note on. Reason number one is that it takes no extra time out of the day. It is a stupidly simple intervention. The people you work with can continue doing their emails. They can keep watching TV. They can have a meal. They can read a book. They can do whatever. They're just doing it in a more natural context. They're going to find themselves shifting position to position pretty frequently. And it, again, doesn't take any extra effort out of the day. So it's very low barrier of entry. Reason 2 is you get a massive ROI on this. Hip mobility improves, knee resiliency improves, our bodies just start to work better. So it's a low barrier of entry with a massive ROI, which then gets the wheels turning for our clients. And they say, wow, this was really simple. And I feel a whole lot better. Like, what else could I tweak about my life or the way I'm being that could lead to such big results? So we start to shift them in a very easy way from a limited view of the world, a closed view of the world, to a far more open, far more possible world. So we cannot underestimate the power of that. Low barrier of entry, easy to implement, huge ROI. This is one of the biggest wins we can give someone. The other thing that comes to mind is a practice that I call 3D hanging. You grab onto a rail, a door jamb, a bar overhead, a tree branch, whatever, and you lean into it a little bit. And you lean in a variety of directions, a variety of dimensions, putting your shoulder girdle, your rib basket in new configurations. So with floor sitting, we start to open up the pelvic girdle, our lowest body weight center. In 3D hanging, we open up the shoulder girdle, our second body weight center. And so these are 2 interventions that I found to be massively effective in a very minimal amount of time. So these are things that we can share with our clients as practical applications of that evolutionary model. The other one that I've found to be very effective, if we're building our cheat sheet here, is constructive resting position. 5 minutes a day. What that does is give us a perfect petri dish to reduce that neural tension. We're not adding in hours of leisure a day, but we are giving a very effective intervention to reduce neural tension and intentionally downshift every single day. So if you want 3 practical applications of this evolutionary model, we can look to floor sitting, 3D hanging, and constructive resting position as maybe taking an extra 20 minutes out of their day, and wow, the benefits will be massive. So please, feel free to steal that, implement it with your current clients. Let me know what their results are. Like, ask them what their results are. Use those results then for your own practice, and then let me know as well. The more kind of experiential evidence we can build of this, the better. So that's one model of this ecosomatic approach, one kind of line. And there's a whole lot more we can dig into there as well. That still is just kind of the tip of the iceberg. But the other 3-question assessment we can use is looking at the somatic model of understanding. And I think of that as kind of the psychosocial, emotional, mental model. Again, there's a whole lot wrapped up in this, but we can simplify it with 3 questions. What is the life you're currently living? And you can ask this to your current clients. You can ask it to yourself as well, but it's particularly useful in client interventions. What's the life you're currently living? Like, what do you do for a job? How are your relationships? Where do you spend your time? How do you spend your time? Where do you find meaning? What's your life look like at this point? The second question is, what's the life you want to live? Again, you might think back to that question I asked way early on. What would make this life-changing? Like, what's your 10 out of 10 perfect life? When you are applying this in a kind of practice way, like when you're working with people, give them permission to dream big. Give them permission to paint a vision of something really extraordinary. Like, offer up life-changing as a possibility, because so many people, again, when we live in a closed space, we don't even consider life-changing possibilities. It's not anywhere on our radar. So give them permission, give them space to dream really big here. Help them paint a vision of the future that is pure magic. Like that's our job at this point. So that's question 2. What is the dream life you want to live? Question 3 is then, again, what can you do on a consistent day in and day out basis to bridge that gap? you can sense a common theme here. Simplicity, 3 questions, how do we bridge the gap? Those gaps are the reason everybody we're seeing, that's why they're coming to see us in the first place. I don't want to make too sweeping a generalization, but it is either because they are living out of alignment with themselves as a species, or they are living out of alignment with themselves as a person. They are living in a way that is out of context with how they want to live or how their animal nature wants to live. Those are the 2 biggies. And so that can get really heady. Let me bring it down with one of my favorite examples, jaw tension. If someone has like jaw tension here and they can't release their jaw, their head, their neck, their shoulders, everything else in their body. Very often my kind of blasé way of saying this is, okay, you need to chew more. Like you need to chew foods like cured meats, hard cheeses, fibrous vegetables. Like you need to get your jaws working. So that would be the evolutionary model. And then you need to speak your mind. Like if you're literally holding back, if you're holding yourself back, if you're biting your tongue, like again, it's in our language, for God's sake. Like this movement work is in our language. If you are holding back and biting your tongue, of course you're going to accumulate jaw tension. And we can call it psychosomatic, we can call it whatever the hell we want. That tension is there for a reason. They are not using their jaw as a human animal is meant to use their jaw, and they are not using their jaw in a way that serves them as a human, that allows them to fully express and embody themselves. So that's just an easy example to bring into light this kind of ecosomatic way of looking. We need to look at the broader context of the species and of the individual, of their ecology and their somatic makeup. Again, anytime someone is coming to work with us, it is an issue of alignment. Alignment with their nature and alignment with their nature. So I hope this sheds a little bit of light on how this work kind of came to be. Again, this is kind of like tip of the iceberg stuff, right? We talked about a lot of different fields of science, a lot of different aspects of a person, their biology, their psychology, their mental health, their relationships. But anyway, this will at least give us a foundation that we can build on in further conversations. And so if you have any questions, if you need any more clarification, don't hesitate to get in touch. I hope you find this useful, and I look forward to seeing what you make of it.